Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for joining. Really, the show is all about honoring humankind, personkind. The idea behind it is that what we have developed as partners in the world, in the earth, is really quite magnificent, and we do that through inspirational stories and people's stories. The idea once again is that when people start to see the brilliance that we have, that we're responsible for, perhaps that'll be a catalyst for a more peaceful world. Today we are focusing on Yom Ha'Zikaron in Israel. Yom Ha'Zikaron is basically it's a remembrance day, and it's a 24-hour period when we remember the 24,000 plus, both Jews and non-Jews, who have fallen fighting for Israel and the Jewish people around the world, as well as non-Jews and Jews who were killed in terrorist attacks. We are very honored to have with us today two individuals who are really part and parcel of the Israel and the Jewish struggle, the development of the state of Israel and the Jewish people, and people who have individuals who have paid a lot in order to make sure that the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, are stronger. And that our survivability is more intact. I want to start by introducing my very dear friend, Eli Rubenstein, who is the International Director of Education for March of the Living and the Senior Spiritual Leader at Congregation Habonim. How are you, Eli?
Good morning, and thanks for taking the time to do this, both you
and
Gabby.
And thank you for putting this together, Eli. Our dear friend, Dr. Gabrielle Klein, is here with us. How are you, Gab?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Eli.
I'm so incredibly honored and happy that you are doing this interview, and I thank you so much from the depths of my heart. I know that you're there with your wonderful father, and we wish him well. The story behind the story here on this Yom Ha'Zikaron is that you made aliyah a number of years ago, and you also have 6 children. You're married to our friend Dennis Klein. And you're a doctor. Now, you and I did an interview, which I was just listening to in part, probably about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And it was a wonderful, wonderful interview. We talked about everything, about your children, about making aliyah, about you climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, right?
Right.
And I don't know if you remember this, but we also talked about your hiking shoes.
Yeah. Okay.
You wore them for
They're
like
in the
months
closet.
and you wore them months prior to climbing the mountain, right?
Right.
It was pretty impressive.
They've been put away for a while.
You're the doctor for a Haredi, for ultra-Orthodox population in Israel. So let's get started here. In terms of a citizen of Israel, which you are, you're now in Toronto, but when you're in Israel, what happens on Yom Ha'Zikaron?
So usually they have a lot of tekesim, which is ceremony. I don't know how to translate
Ceremonies.
Where they remember each community. Different communities have different ceremonies where they remember and they light torches and they sing songs and they have a very large one at Har Herzl. They have a large one at the Knesset. You have to be invited to those. Then they send every soldier, every lone soldier, every citizen, every person that was buried or died in a terrorist attack or in the wars. They send soldiers to visit their graves as part of their duties. And basically, it's a time of mourning of all the lost people in Israel. And often they have sing-alongs in people's houses of sad songs. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of terror and a lot of wars, so we have a lot of volume and music associated with it as well.
Ellie, you've been in Israel for Yom Ha'Zikaron through the March of the Living, right?
Yes, many times.
How has it been for you?
Well, the 2 things that I recall most are, first of all, the siren. When the siren goes off and everybody just stands in silence for a minute, wherever they are, in a hotel, in a restaurant, in a synagogue, on the streets, cars will just come to a stop, and there's a real solemn moment of mourning and reflection. And the other thing that I always recall from these Yom Ha'Zikaron ceremonies is the people they talk about. There's two tremendous losses. First of all, there's this loss of potential of these incredible young people. Almost all of them, people talk about how peace-loving they were, and how artistic, and how creative, and how amazing, and how wonderful and kind. Everyone a lost potential to the world. And the second thing I think about is the irreplaceable hole, the emptiness that families are left and friends are left with behind. And it's, I won't say it's inconsolable, but it's almost inconsolable. So those two emotions, the loss of these tremendously, incredibly creative, gifted young people to the world, and the loss of their families and friends, which will remain with the rest of their lifetimes. Those are the emotions I remember from the ceremonies I went to.
Just a little bit more background on Yom Ha'Zikaron. The day opens with a siren the preceding evening at 8 o'clock, given that in the Hebrew calendar system, a day begins at sunset. The siren is heard all over the country and lasts for 1 minute, during which Israelis stop everything, including driving on highways, and stand in silence, commemorating the fallen and showing respect. By law, all places of entertainment are closed on the eve of Yom Ha'Zikaron, and broadcasting and educational bodies note the solemnity of the day. Regular television programs cease for the day, and the names and the ranks of every soldier who died for Israel are displayed in a 24-hour television broadcast. Since the founding of the State of Israel has chosen the red everlasting flower as the national memorial flower, the flower is depicted in many memorial sites and can be seen worn as stickers on shirts and jackets through Yom Ha'Zikaron. Since 2019, the nonprofit organization Dam HaMaccabim has been distributing pins with the red, real, everlasting flower throughout Israel and the United States. Gab, Yom Ha'Zikaron has become very personal to you, not only because you're a Jew, not only because you're a citizen of Israel, but a little while back, your future son-in-law was killed through his fighting in Gaza. He was engaged to your daughter, Rivka. His name was Anand Drari. And you were telling Ellie and I about him and what a special human being that he was in terms of the love of the country, the love of the world, the love of nature, his many, many, many friends. I think you said he had about 40 or 50 friends who are now honoring his memory. Just tell us from your perspective, what was Anand like?
So it's hard to imagine talking about Hanan now in the past, because sitting at this kitchen table in Toronto, he had been here just less than a year ago,
Yes.
visiting my parents. Hanan had a passion for life, a passion for learning, a passion for art, a passion for nature, a passion for my daughter. He was incredibly caring and kind to her, and always looking out for her, and just everything to make her happy, always thinking about her. He was also an incredibly giving person. He also volunteered to go and fight. He wasn't called up. Asked him why. He said, I have to be there. I have to be part of it. I have to defend the country. He went in November. He was injured on December 17th by an RPG that hit his tank that as he was leaving Gaza to for his last tour, and 5 minutes out from the border. He was 4 people in the tank, and it was an open tank, so the RPG hit it, and it was very hard RPG. Apparently, I know a lot about weapons now, unfortunately. And one person walked away, one person was killed instantly, and one kid is still in rehab. He had a leg injury, and Hanan was injured. He was taken immediately to Barzilai. Within 8 minutes, he was in Barzilai, evacuated immediately, and he was meant to survive. He was in the ICU for 2.5 months, and because there's mostly sewage water in Gaza and the ground is not clean, his open wound was infected with a fungus that was not treatable, and he died of the fungal infection 2.5 months later in Tel Shomer. So we were with him. He was in and out of coma in the ICU in Tel Shomer for 2.5 months. he was just an incredible person, a passion for life, and he had so many dreams. He dreamt of becoming a doctor. He was on his way, and to change, and he wanted to become a doctor to change the world, to help people. And he was being groomed by the dean of his studies to go into research, discover things. He was going to force him, put him forward to be a PhD, MD in Weitzman. He also loved to have a good time. He loved to hike the land of Israel. He loved everything about Israel. He loved the Jewish people. And he was an incredibly kind and giving person. Like I remember my daughter telling me they were once walking, they spent their time in Jerusalem, the streets of Jerusalem. He lived near the Shuk there. His parents live in Arnona of Jerusalem. And they would just walk the streets all the time. They were walking home on a Friday night once, and they saw an older woman carrying bags, and he ran to take the bags, and the woman started saying, oh, is it Anashim Tovim? There's a song about Anashim Tovim, good people walking the streets. It always reminds me of Hanan. He was always, there to help out, there to be a listening ear. And in any way he could, he was always trying to do good. He constantly would focus his day. He was a competitively focused. He focused his day on what can I prioritize? What can I do for this person? How can I help my parents? How can I help be there for Rivka? How can I contribute? What is the best use of my time? He couldn't even, my daughter would go crazy because he wouldn't have been able to watch a random TV show or a movie. He had to do something that was meaningful, focused, and had some sort of meaning to it. Everything was about meaning, and going to Gaza was about meaning for him.
Tell us the porcupine story.
Oh, everybody loves the porcupine story.
We like porcupines.
He found a porcupine. He saved it from, I don't know, being drowned, or I don't even know. He picked it up.
Here in Canada. Canada.
No, the porcupine was in Israel. He sent a picture.
Oh, you have porcupines in Israel?
Yeah, it's a kippot. I'm not sure if it's an actual porcupine. It's like a family. And he sent a picture and started to donate to the Porcupine Society. So his aunt printed beautiful cups with his name and his memory to have a cup of coffee before the Sabbath comes in. So he liked to do that. And they sold 4,000 of those cups, and all the proceeds went to the Porcupine Society of Israel. And there weren't 50 people involved in there was 400 people in the WhatsApp group that are very, very, that Hanan was a really part of his life, 400 to 500. And there was constant visual at the hospital. And he affected so many people that everyone felt that he was their best friend, and he was their confidant. He was the one that they were the most important to him.
Ellie's question when you told us the story before was, how did he find a porcupine? Right, Ellie?
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah. He loved nature walks, and he loved animals.
I think the great revelation of this show today, or at least one of them, is that in Israel, there's really everything, including a porcupine society.
Right, exactly. I don't think they've ever had a contribution of this magnitude before. They're very excited.
I think what was really special, and Ellie, maybe you have a story that comes to mind when I put this point out there, is when Hanan was dying, he was on his deathbed, he turned to you, Gabrielle, and he said to you, how are you doing?
Yeah.
That's very special.
And how is the family?
How's the family?
How is the family? How is everyone doing? Where is everyone? What are you doing every day? What do you do every day? And, and I told him, save your energy. You're going to get out of here. Don't try to overexert yourself. But it turned out, no, he wasn't getting out of there because the fungus had taken over.
Yeah.
I think that just symbolizes to us the caliber and the exceptional fine character of the people we've lost. And we can tell the story over hundreds of thousands of times. So, yeah.
Right. It's like the good ones. Like my daughter is part of a amazing organization that's called Hishira Harav Chavera. They left behind a girlfriend, and she meets many people. And every time they tell about their fiance or boyfriend, they always sound like the most special people, the most contributing, the most giving. It's almost like the special ones.
I think the beauty of my friendship with Ellie and his appearance on the show today is that Ellie is not only involved in March of the Living in a very heavy way and has been for years, as well as his temple, but he's also a marvelous storyteller. Ellie, does this special nature of our people, of our fighters, is there a story that goes along with that?
Well, I remember many years ago, there was a helicopter crash in northern
Yes.
Israel. Do you remember that when 73 soldiers passed away when two helicopters hit each other near Shari?
Yes. One of the widows lives in our community.
Oh, okay, interesting. So I remember I was sitting in the office with my good friend Dov Harris, and he's reading the names of the people, and one of them is I believe was Gilad Meshakir, if I'm not mistaken, um, and um, and he recognized the last name Meshakir, which is not a very common name, as the name of a friend of his from South Africa who was in his 50s. Obviously, it wasn't him. So he calls him up and he says, is this related to you? And there's a soft voice in the phone says, it's actually my son. It's son of one of the 73 who died in the helicopter crash. But he said, you know what? My son's death is not in vain. And my friend Bill Harris says, what do you mean? He says, what happened was there were supposed to be 74 soldiers on those helicopters. What happened was when my son showed up, they accidentally put his name twice on the manifest. So his name appeared there twice. So they had, in fact, 73 soldiers, not 74, but they had 74 soldiers. And when the 74th soldier showed up, they said, we're full. He said, what do you mean? I said, no, we're full. We're full. And so his life was saved because his son's name appeared twice on the list. So he said, you see, my son's death wasn't in vain. And so I always think of that story in the Jewish people story, that we take the most difficult experiences, the most challenging, we try to give it meaning. We try to give some kind of hope, some kind of seed of encouragement, how we can move forward. And we do that by talking about these person's qualities and trying to emulate in our lives. So I always remember that story. It's kind of like Jacob wrestling the angel, that when they left, Jacob forced the angel to bless him and say, listen, you wounded me, but I'm not going to heal until you give meaning to the suffering. And I think that's part of, Viktor Frankl talks about giving meaning even through the suffering. So I think that's part of what I think about in Yom Ha'Zikaron, trying to give meaning to this very difficult day.
Yeah, that's really poignant.
Thank you.
Gabrielle, there's many different, excuse me, there's many different facets to your life as a wife, as a doctor. As we said before, much of your clientele is Haredi, ultra Orthodox, which is fascinating. Listen to our prior interview because it's really special. You are special, Gab. And one of the aspects of your parenting, being a mom to 6 children, is that on October 7th, your son Shlomo was in the South. Now, and he found himself involved in a very serious gunfight, which went on for hours. Now, Gab, if you're okay with this, there's been a number of things published about Shlomo and that gunfight and his heroism. Are you okay if I read a bit of it?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
And then I'd like you
From
to.
which article from?
Well, your husband Dennis has been sending me quite a few things on Instagram. He's a great publicist, Dennis is. So kol hakavod to him. I feel the pride when I read these things because you are the mom and he is the father of a hero, of a Jewish hero. And that's a really big deal to all of us, Gab. So if you don't mind, I'll read this piece here. On October 7th, Shlomo Klein woke up to the noise of rocket interceptors. He jumped into his uniform, grabbed his machine gun, and ran into the safe room, which was the dining hall, along with his fellow soldiers. After a few minutes, his commander announced that terrorists had infiltrated the base and everyone needed to get into full gear to fight. Shlomo was ready to go. For 40 minutes, he fought until out of nowhere grenades landed at his feet. The soldiers decided they needed to retreat and figure out a plan. Shlomo ran back into the dining hall where he fought with his friend since first grade, Halal. He and Halal went back out to fight. They saw terrorists on the other side of the base from where they had been originally, and they knew that the base was now full of terrorists coming from every single direction. Shlomo and Halal fought hard, taking out terrorists and saving lives while doing so. While in a crossfire with terrorists from behind a wall, Halal was fatally shot and fell in battle right next to Shlomo. Aware that the terrorists were kidnapping soldiers dead and alive, Shlomo risked his life for his friend. He put down his gun and ran into the line of fire to save his fallen friend's body. While in the process of this heroic act, Shlomo was shot by an AK-47 taking a 7.62 millimeter bullet to his right arm. Shlomo ran back into the dining room where he was treated with a tourniquet, at which point he passed out. After regaining consciousness, he heard people yelling that terrorists were all about the dining hall, and everyone needed to focus on not being kidnapped. The soldiers built a barricade of tables to protect themselves when the terrorists entered. Shlomo and his friends, all of whom were injured, fought back against gunfire and grenades for hours. 7 hours passed before the IDF's elite reconnaissance unit, Shayetet 13, arrived to help. They entered the dining hall yelling, Shema Yisrael and Yisrael Chai, and anything else they could think of to convince the soldiers that they were not terrorists. Eventually, the recon unit gained the trust of the trapped soldiers. Shlomo grabbed the first person he could, ran to safety through the cover of Shayetet 13. Arriving at a safe point, Shlomo found two of his friends who greeted him with hugs and told him that the other 7 guys in his unit were alive, but they were injured. Over the next few hours, Shlomo, who was neither a commander nor a combat medic, took both roles upon himself. He took control of every challenging situation he encountered, treated the injuries of his comrades, directed his fellow soldiers, and even guided a rescue helicopter to a meeting point where he could load his injured friends onto the aircraft to be flown to safety. None of which is in his job description as a negavist, someone fighting in the Negev. But Shlomo is a hero. Is that not what it is?
Negavist is a person. Negavist is a person that holds the machine gun.
I see.
A Negev is a type of machine gun.
I see.
Okay.
But Shlomo is a hero who took initiative and took control when help was needed. After so many hours of worry about others and running the show, Shlomo looked down at his injured arm. To save an arm with a tourniquet, the tourniquet must be removed within 4 hours of being put on. The tourniquet had been tied at 7:30 a.m. It was now 3 p.m. In conclusion, Shlomo had to get to a hospital immediately. After helicopter transport him to Soroka Hospital, Shlomo was taken immediately into emergency, fully expecting to wake up without an arm. But Baruch Hashem, as it is written here, his arm was saved. Today, Shlomo is in physical therapy, working to get his arm as strong as possible. This is the story of a fighter who, despite the situation in which he found himself, did everything he possibly could to save the lives of others, preventing even more tragedy on an already disastrous day. Thanks to Shlomo's strength and heroism, Hallel was not kidnapped that day, and his family was able to hold a prayer funeral for the lost soldier. That's quite a story, Gabrielle. How is Shlomo?
Well, Shlomo is fighting hard. Just the same skills that he used to fight hard to fight against the terrorists are the same skills that he's using now to rehab. So every day he's in rehab. Every day he's fighting hard to stay positive, to stay focused. We recently met with the parents of Hallel and told them this story. And so I thought that was incredibly brave of him. I didn't want to go. It was hard for me. And just meeting the parents, they were so grateful for Shlomo to share with them and to tell them about the last moments of Hallel.
Avrum, can I add one thought to
Yeah,
this?
jump in, Ellie. Jump in.
No, I believe it was last summer, Gabby, when your kids came to my cottage, right, on Christian Island. Avrum, you've been there, and Gabby's been there as well, along with Dennis, which is a wonderful First Nations community. And one of the First Nations community members, Sanford Mitzamam, a wonderful man, took them out in a boat for a day of fishing and touring, and they had the most enjoyable time. We got some great pictures from that experience. And in fact, Sanford keeps inquiring how they're doing. And when I told him that Shlomo was injured and about what happened to your future son-in-law, he sent real tear-shaped emojis and condolences. So they formed quite a close relationship and friendship. And one of the most beautiful pictures I have from that experience in my entire time at Christian Island is a picture of Shlomo standing on one of those incredible rocks next to my cottage fishing. And I think of that peaceful moment of just bliss and joy in nature. And then I think of what he must have experienced when here's a young man, doesn't want to hurt anybody, just defending Israel, all of a sudden being attacked and from inches of his life. And just reminding me of how fortunate we are to live in Canada, in a democratic society, free from all these kinds of experiences. And in Israel, what kinds of sacrifices, what kind of pressures 20 young people in their early 20s, late teens are under. And we should always remember, the burden is not equal, and that they're fighting for the very existence, and we don't have that kind of challenge. I just think of the contrast of him holding his gun, fending off terrorists, and on a peaceful Christian island holding a fishing rod, and the difference in our experiences. That just came to me.
And he was a very peaceful boy, so he was very upset that he was kind of grateful that he didn't kill anybody, or didn't see that he killed anybody, because he didn't want to be killing any people. That's not what he wanted to do.
Even the people attacking him.
Yeah. Even
that's reminiscent of that.
He was really focused on at the beginning. Lucky I didn't have to kill anybody point blank. I didn't see them. And he was very upset if he had to kill someone.
Gabby, there's a very famous midrash. I'm sure you know that, but Yaakov and Esav, you know what I'm talking about?
Tell us.
Basically, it says when Jacob met Esau, and there was a moment before they were about to meet, and Esau was very upset with Jacob 30 years ago with the birthright, and Jacob didn't know what was going to happen. And the text says that Jacob was both afraid and terrified. The rabbis say, why was he afraid and terrified? He was afraid, obviously, he thought he was going to lose his life. But was he terrified? What's the extra expression? Where the rabbis say he was afraid about losing his own life, but he's terrified he might have to take a life. Even if the life was in self-defense, even if the act was justified, he was terrified, because we never want to harm other people, even if they deserve it. That's really not the outcome we want. We want them to change their ways and be good people. And so that reminds me so much of that famous Rashi, famous midrash on the double expression when Jacob meets Esau in Torah.
But if you hear what happened on October 7th, the cruelty and the lack of humanness, it's hard to understand. It's really hard to understand. There's like no one to talk to. They were just like animals there, just like animals. And it wasn't like they were just they weren't attacking like Israel wasn't attacking. They were attacking. They planned it, and it was El Nakba fighters. They were the commando units. They were very stealth. Shlomo said he didn't hear them at all. They came in organized. They broke down all the barriers. Like he was secure in his base. He said, I'm secure in my base. Like, we have a lot of security. They broke down all the security.
So, Gabrielle, when you say those things, it reminds me of it. We're so tempted. We're so tempted when we hear these stories of incredible cruelty and incredible inhumanity, just to give up and say, what's the point? I always remember what Eli Wiesel said. He says after the Holocaust, despite everything that happened to the Jewish people, despite everything that happened, and despite the temptation to give up our faith in God, to give up our faith in humanity, to give up our faith, period, we will not do so. We'll still keep on fighting for all humanity, for the Jewish people, and for God, even though we have all the reasons not to. So I always remember Eli Wiesel's words, even in the face of such horrific actions, we can't become totally cynical about the nature of humanity. We can't give up hope. That's what Eli Wiesel was.
Yeah, well, it's very hard for these young people to see the cruelty when they grew up in fishing on Christian Island,
Yeah.
And that was the last a month before. Yeah. So, and his WhatsApp picture is him on that fishing.
Oh, really? That's his WhatsApp picture. Wow.
Yeah, that's his WhatsApp picture, and then it changed. So now he has a different one. But it's very hard to reconcile that kind of cruelty, that kind of, and for a peaceful, loving, very sensitive, very kind person to be in such a hard battle and to be against so much terror is very, very, very hard on the soul. But he takes great inspiration, even from the beginning. I said, be like your grandfather. Be like your grandfather. He survived the war. He rebuilt his life. He survived many, many atrocities, and he rebuilt. And we're here to support you. And the support that he's gotten from Israeli society in general, and from the rehab centers, and from the staff, and from the communities, and whatever, is unbelievable.
Gab, can I ask you a question about your grandfather?
Yeah, my father.
Sorry, your father. I apologize. His grandfather. So, Avrum, I'm not sure if you know this, but Joe Mandel came on the March of Living with us. And one of the most amazing moments of the March for the last 30 years I've ever been part of, which is an incredible experience, is that Joe was liberated by American soldiers. And for his entire life, he regretted not being able to thank the soldiers who liberated him. But, he was trying to survive. And by complete coincidence, we brought a group of American liberators. I believe it was a 2011 March of Living, I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And one of them was one of the soldiers who liberated Gunskirchen, where Joe was liberated from so many years ago. And they meet each other and they hug each other. And Joe says, after that experience, when I got a chance to thank my liberator, I feel like I can live forever. I'll never forget that moment. Just a beautiful moment. And Gab, you were there to see that. So let me ask you a question. How is your father dealing with, here is somebody who close to 80 years ago almost lost his life, and now we have a Jewish state, and now he's dealing with this kind of, how is he processing all of that?
I don't think he's processing it. You know, he's had a lot of loss. My mother recently passed away, so it was a lot of loss for Shlomo as well. We had a lot of loss, a lot of pain. We try to keep it from him, and he keeps on asking, what happened to your arm? And Shlomo says, well, I got shot. There's a war, and that's the end of it. He doesn't process it.
So how do you process it as a daughter of a Holocaust survivor? How does that?
I'm like, it's enough. Did my father suffer enough? Yeah. Why do we have to suffer? He also built a beautiful life in Canada. There's one, you know, it's always wondering why leave. He sacrificed a lot to come to Canada. He was a very proud Canadian. You know, when they had the national anthems, they used to play them before the movies when we were growing up. He would stand up in the national anthem Canada. He was a very proud Canadian. And Canada gave him a beautiful life here. And I kind of, in a way, by moving away, said, you know, I'm not sure. You know, this is not, maybe I didn't value it enough, you know. And but yeah, I'm sure he'd be proud of, if he was, you know, able to possibly be proud of him and thank God, you know, Shlomo's alive and able to get the proper support. And within, you know, it wasn't fast enough, but within 15 hours, he was rescued in a hospital, and he's getting support and care and love and affection, not only from the people of Israel, but at the beginning and then in the hospital. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people came every day from all over the world to see him. And everybody just doesn't know what to do. And they're constantly saying, what can we do for you? What can we do for you? And we're like, I don't know, just support the soldiers, support Israel, support us, and, you know, and advocate.
You know your Shlomo since he was born, and since he was walking around like a toddler, and then growing through life, just going to school and proceeding. When you heard about what happened in the South and what your son had done, his heroism, knowing his character better than anybody as his mom, was any of that surprising?
No, because he always did what he always wanted to be the better person. He always wanted to be the better person. He always wants to do good. And then after in the hospital, for example, people would come in, and there would be, I don't know, 40 people that would come in from the States and just want to come to his room, hear a story. And I was like protecting him. And he's like, no, they came all this way. Or, you know, you have to talk nicely and you have to let everybody in. And he's always giving back. And then I just saw a video from him in LA, and he's thanking people all the time for, you know, thank you for being a hero. He goes, thank you. You know, my pleasure. I'm like, and a very kind and sweet person. I'm sorry for his character that he had to go through such atrocities, but he is also incredibly disciplined, incredibly always has a positive focus, always appreciates everything. So hopefully that will help him get through the the challenges that are going to be facing.
How's his dad coping with all of this? How's Dennis?
So Dennis, you know, basically was terrified when he went into special forces. I wasn't. I thought he'll be fine. You know, I was proud of him, and he was terrified all along. He was preparing himself for, you know, when you go into the army, you go into special forces, things can happen. And Dennis himself was born with a bit of a disability, and he felt very comfortable when Shlomo now has a disability with his right arm on how to overcome disability and lack of function, people looking at you and people. So it's been very hard on my husband, Dennis. Very, very hard to see your son like that, but he's been a pillar of strength for him. And he understands that when you don't focus on what you don't have and you focus on what you do have, you focus on your strengths, it's the only way to get out of it.
Gabrielle,
sorry for yourself, you're out. It's game over. You don't feel sorry for yourself and you move forward, you're okay.
As a parent, I have an 18-year-old son here in Toronto, and his next big deal is going to university. So there's a dramatic difference between what an 18-year-old boy does, or man, boy, in Israel versus what they do in Canada. But I do know, as a father, you know, the reality that you want to protect your child from all potential danger. As an Israeli mother, knowing that your son was going into the forces that he was going into, and then fighting, and then going through what he had gone through, how do you respond as an Israeli mom, or as a mom?
So for me, it's been very difficult because I felt that I wasn't able to protect him. I didn't guide him correctly. I guided him in my ideals, and nobody wants their kid to be the hero. But I'm very proud of him, and I know I can't. And I've been all along the rehab doctors and nurses and staff and the army people have told me, back off, let him do it. Don't overprotect him. My natural thing is now to try to overprotect him, to help make things easier. It's very painful to see him in pain. It's very painful to see your son struggling. But I have to believe in his strength. And as a father, Dennis has a different attitude. It's not to protect him, but to give him the tools that he needs to succeed. And his job is to teach him the tools he needs to succeed before this happened, to succeed, to live a happy, responsible life, and meaningful life. And he now sees his job also to provide him with the tools that he needs. And tools meaning emotional tools, psychological tools, physical tools, surroundings, anything to help him get out of it and proceed to a fulfilling, meaningful life.
Yeah, with the loss of your son-in-law, and we'll call him that if you're okay with that.
Perfect.
And knowing that we've lost 277 soldiers in Gaza, and of course more than that on October 7th. Again, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this has become much more personal for you. How are you relating today to Yom Ha'Zikaron?
Well, Yom Ha'Zikaron is incredibly difficult in general, but now especially my daughter speaking in front of 2,000 people, it's going to be very difficult for her, but she's also very brave. And I can't get back to Israel for Yom Ha'Zikaron. I came to my obligations to see my father right now, and there's no flight. So I'm going to be here. So I'm doing this podcast to help, people understand what it was like, what it's been like for the past 7 months. And I think the constant threat of war is also very stressful for the people who've been through the trauma, especially Shlomo, who was in a shelter for 7 hours fighting Hamas. So going back into the shelters is very, very, very triggering for him. And also the sounds of the Iron Dome and also the sirens from tonight will be triggering. Mm-hmm. Because those sirens are the sirens also to go into the shelters. I think the whole it feels bad not to be there because the whole country's mourning. But for somebody like Shlomo, who lost so many people, so many friends, and his friend right beside him, who got shot in the neck right beside him, and he sat in his pool of blood, Yom Ha'Zikaron has been every day for the past 7 months. So it's not, I don't know how it's going to be. Also going to Heartfelt is difficult. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So it won't be more a public mourning than the personal mourning, but we're doing the personal mourning all the time.
Did you know his friend, Hillel?
No, I did not.
Do you know anything about him?
Yeah, well, we met his parents, Hillel Saldon. His grandparents, I didn't know that this was his grandparents. His grandparents are actually American Olim. They lived in Dom Har Chavon, like outside of Chavon, for many, many years. His grandmother was the librarian in the community that I lived in. His parents were actually staff at a camp in the States for many summers in Camp Jones. They recently did a road trip across America during Corona for 9 months. And he was a nature lover. They showed us albums and pictures. They told us a lot about him. He loved to horseback ride, and he had a cowboy hat, in the northern Golan. He spent a lot of time on a horse farm. And he was a really brave soldier. And he found his way in the special forces with Shlomo.
Rest in peace, Hillel.
Yeah. And the last time Shlomo was with Hillel, they were guarding a base somewhere in the middle of Israel, like 8 of them. They found an old, I don't know, tire or something, and they made it into a cold bath, and they had bathtubs in it. So they were trying to make things better than they were.
Zichrona Livracha.
Yeah.
You're a doctor, and many of your patients are Haredi, which means ultra orthodox. And again, fascinating story. Kol hakavod, all the power to you for what you do in Israel. It's marvelous, and I just love talking to you about it. I'm so impressed with what you've accomplished, Gab. What, if any, was there a response from your Haredi patients on or after October 7th? It would be
So,
after, actually, because it was Shabbat.
right, I'd worked on the Friday on the 6th. I never went back to work because I wasn't able to. I had to be with Shlomo and his surgery. He had 11 surgeries. And then I was in the rehab with him. But when I did go back to work, they were very concerned about my son. They were very sympathetic. They heard about my future son-in-law. Many of them do go to the army, but they don't go to combat, whatever. They're more like technical and stuff. And they were very, very sympathetic, and very kind.
Eli, I wonder if you can help us wrap things up here with a story about Israel, about Yom Ha'Zikaron, about the strength of the Jewish people.
Well, I want to ask a question and wrap it up with a poem, if that's okay for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
And
yeah.
Question for Gabby before I wrap it up with a poem is, in this terrible time of conflict and violence and horror, there's also been moments of unity and people coming together in Israel. Can you please describe to me what you've seen since October 7th, how society's come together? I think it's important.
I'm really happy you asked that question.
Great question, yeah.
Because I really want to talk about what our experience was like in the hospital and in the rehab center, especially in Tel Shomer. I've never seen anything like it. I'm talking thousands of people. But at the beginning, they would literally just walk into Shlomo's room with iPads, gifts, money, treats. Like every company, like Osem would bring huge baskets. Now it's brought shoes for every shoulder. I got their size, brought shoes. Every big company, every high-tech company would bring catering. Hanukkah was insane. Like thousands of people. Like you had to stop people from coming in. I mean, there's no rule. So, 1 o'clock in the morning, people are still coming in to bring food. And literally the first weekend we got to the rehab center, like it was Shabbat. A lot of the kids had gone home. They go home for the weekend. And after that, we went home. And they just come in the morning. They make sfinge, which is not sfinge. They make a special Saturday morning egg and dough thing. And they just bring it from their house in their pots and they bring it to you. Just like people like randomly on their Saturday morning, their one day off, they're bringing food to injured soldiers and their families. And they literally every night people would bring pots of food, delicious homemade food, offer it because, hospital food is hospital food. And their language of love is food there. And just gifts and food and workshops and talks and just random hugs. And people came from Toronto. They brought PlayStations for each soldier. They brought that one guy from Israel brought Lego sets, and Shlomo started doing the Lego sets. He used to do Lego when he was little, and it was actually good for his to practice with his left hand, how to use his left hand, also for his concentration. He was doing Lego all the time. Every time he finished a Lego set, contacted the guy, brought another $1,000 Lego set, big car, then became a whole thing in the rehab. Now he's bringing Lego for everyone because Shlomo was always sitting there doing Lego. Thank God he was able to concentrate and put these very complicated Lego sets. Like just incredible outpouring of kindness and understanding and support. Chavrei Knesset came many times. Heads of government, celebrities, many celebrities. Of course, Israeli celebrities would come and sing songs for Shlomo in his room. Shlomo is very, very uniquely loves chazanut, like my father, cantorial music. So the chief cantor of the armed forces became Shai Abramson.
Amazing guy.
Amazing guy. Became very good friends of Shlomo's and would come and sing to him with Ozzy Schwartz in his room, and Shlomo was just blown away. Many Instagrammers came. He wasn't that interested in the influencers. He was more interested in the chazanim, so thank God. And they put out anybody wants to date the soldier, they put a whole thing on Shlomo, and thousands of girls wanted to date him, and he's like not so interested in Instagram influencers. Hollywood, some Hollywood stars that are big supporters of Israel came to visit him. He's in WhatsApp. Come visit me anytime. WhatsApp contact with them all the time. They maintain contact with him. Many, not just celebrity chefs come and make food for the soldiers. The kindness of the therapists, the doctors, the staff, the surgeons, the psychologist, everybody was incredibly kind. Everybody was in shock. They were all suffering as well. We're constantly running to the shelters when we got to Tel Shomer. There was alarm drones and sirens going off almost every night. It was very, very triggering for Shlomo and very scary for us because it was such a thing for him. And just the incredible staff and the ability of the Israeli hospitals and society to mobilize very, very quickly. They took the geriatric wing, the entire geriatric wing, and because the rehab hospital filled up very quickly, and by the time we got there on November 2nd, they took all the geriatric medical staff and therapy staff and nursing staff and just turned them into treatment of soldiers. They branded it beautifully. They called it Chozrim L'Chaim, returning to life. And they rebranded the geriatric hospital and made it nobody, like at first we couldn't even find it. The taxi driver couldn't find it. He was the first room in the second ward. By the time January, February came, there were 6 wards open. They closed most of them now, thank God. Even his ward is emptying out. And the geriatric staff just were so kind. They were so knowledgeable. At the beginning, it was really hard for them to figure out all the different bandaging and stuff of all the different soldiers and to deal with soldiers instead of geriatrics. It was a whole new learning experience for them, but they really stepped up. They were an amazing staff, very caring. And the soldiers were used to being commanders and young people. And they also made a porch where there was parties every night. It didn't feel like a hospital. It felt like a celebration. Every night was a celebration. Now, of course, Shlomo wasn't feeling well at first and he couldn't go, but every night, people would bring fancy coffee machines. They would bring in music. They would bring all sorts of things, tefillin, like he got 5 pairs of tefillin because the Hamas took his tefillin and, and anything that he wanted. What can I give you? Or one day a bunch of mothers were sitting around and we said, both all of the 3 of us, our sons were injured in their arms. And we were saying it's so cold for them and they need warming things. And guys walking by, he said, okay, let me go buy them. Comes back with warming pillows for the kids. One guy came every day with beautiful breakfasts and bags for anybody that wants, so you don't have to eat the hospital food. And we're constantly looking for him. And it's just an outpouring of love and support. Every celebrity came to do concerts there. There were concerts every single night at the beginning, every single night. They now offer workshops on how to go back into society. They offer all sorts of workshops. Shlomo in his outpatient rehab, he moved to that area so that he could stay in Tel Shomer. The outpatient rehab has yoga. He has gardening. He has ceramics. There's also people coming from the States. There's one guy that comes from the States. He's in touch with us all the time. He's a specialist in prosthetic limbs. He's a really big specialist. He builds very complicated. He's in touch with all the soldiers. He comes once a month and fits them with their limbs and does specifications for the limbs, builds them, collaborated with Tel Shomer and builds the limbs for them there. And he's going to help Shlomo as well. He meets with him every time he comes. So like the outpouring of love and affection and support from every aspect of Israeli society as well as out of Israel has been amazing. Like blown away.
Beautiful. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Gab, before we hear Eli's poem, one of the things I often ask my Israeli guests is if they can send a message to we who live in the diaspora, because it's no secret that there's been this enormous proliferation of anti-Semitism. It's a lot different living here than it is in Israel. You'll often hear from Israelis or people who made aliyah, Israel's the safest place in the world. I feel so safe here. I'm not sure everybody feels that way, But here in Canada, we are sort of wobbling a little bit. And I'm wondering if you have a message for us.
About the anti-Semitism, or about what you can do for the Israeli?
All of the above. Yes, all of the above.
So for people like the people that came and made a difference, it was very, very, very meaningful. So
You mean
for example,
the volunteers, right?
well, regular, like, I don't know, not even volunteers, just people that came off a plane and people that made a difference. So they would bring things that we needed, or they would give things that we needed, or they would provide support that we needed, not so they can say that they visited soldiers, where they're clogging up the hallways, they're talking about themselves, they're coming in randomly on a Tuesday afternoon when Shlomo's resting, asking, can you tell us your story, just to hear the story. Those things are very disturbing, and we're not zoo animals on a display. We need your support. We need the diaspora Jews support. We need it in every way.
Yeah. But
we cannot be zoo animals on display. It's very difficult to hear that it's, safer in Israel than here in Canada. And Canada's, you're not being attacked physically by rockets. You're not but I hear the anti-Semitism. I see it. I'm a alumnus of University of Toronto. I went there for 20 years and many degrees from there. So to hear what's going on campus is difficult. And I see it around me, but it's not something that affects your physical. It's not dangerous. It's disturbing, but it's not dangerous. And right now, but the support of the Jews in the diaspora and the interest and the caring is very, very, very meaningful.
All right. Thank you, Gabrielle Klein, for being with us. And I have even greater respect and give you more honor than I did at the top of the show, because I see what you have done for the Jewish people and for Israel, what your family has done, and your husband and your father and your mother too. So I want to thank you very much for that. And I wish you well. We all wish you well.
Thank you, Avrum.
And as they say in the vernacular, you should only have celebrations moving forward.
Yeah. We can only go forward.
We can only go forward. And you've done a magnificent job here with much courage and strength. Thank you for that. Thank you.
I learned a lot from the people in the rehab and the other Israelis with me. I learned the rehab language. I learned a lot. That everything for now is okay. For this minute, only look at this minute for now.
Yeah.
And also, it's always very, very important to zoom out and look at the big picture. So thank you for that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would ask you please to find a moment for yourself and for your family, for your friends and loved ones on this Yom Ha'Zikaron. We are memorializing the passing of 24,000 people plus who have perished through their sacrifice within the IDF, as well as within terrorist attacks, both Jews and non-Jews. Find a moment, shut things off, close your eyes, and have a moment of silence. Do it twice throughout the day, as our brothers and sisters in Israel do, because they sacrifice for us, all Jews everywhere, and we have to be grateful for that, and we have to take a moment to remember. And the phenomenal thing about our people, about the Jewish people, is that as soon as Yom Ha'Zikaron is finished, we move into a celebration, and we celebrate the establishment of the state of Israel. This, in essence, is the Jewish people. While we suffer and while we mourn, there comes a point where mourning is finished, and we move on, and then we start to experience great joy. As Gabrielle explained, by the way, incredibly, about what happened when her son Shlomo was in the hospital. And she said, these are her words, every night was a celebration. That's unbelievable. And that is the core, that is the neshama, that is the soul of the Jewish people. So thank you so much for watching. We'd ask Eli Rubenstein to wrap things up with a poem.
Thank you, Avrum, and thank you, Gabrielle. And of course, since you asked me to want to do a poem, I'll do two very short poems, if I have your permission. And these are the poems that we recite when the March of Living students come to Israel. It's a transition ceremony from Yom Ha'Zikaron to Yom Ha'atzmaut, from Israel's Remembrance Day to its Independence Day. We have a little bit of a ceremony that marks this transition. And these are the two poems we close the ceremony with, two beautiful poems of peace. The first one's called The Prayer, and it goes like this. What shall I ask of you, O God? I have all that I need. There's nothing that I lack. Only one thing will I ask. And not for me alone, but for many mothers and children and fathers, and not only in this land, but also in foreign and enemy lands. I wish to ask you for peace. Yes, it's peace that I want, and I know you'll not refuse the request of a single young girl. You created a land of peace, and in it the city of peace, in which stood a temple of peace. But peace has not yet come. What shall I ask of you, O God, since I have all I need? I only ask you for peace. Only peace. That's a modern poem written by a young Jewish girl in Israel. And the closing poem is a prayer for peace by Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, based on his words, who lived about 250 years ago in Eastern Europe. And it goes like this. Source of Shalom, ruler of Shalom, grant Shalom to the people of Israel. Let the Shalom spread to all your creatures. Let there be an end to hatred, to jealousy, and competition between people. Let there only be one great love and Shalom between us all, so we can all gather together, everyone with their fellows, speaking to each other and learning truth from each other. Source of Shalom, source of peace, bless us with Shalom, and we all say, Amen.
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 And I'm Yisrael Chai.